I wouldn't feel good. I would feel utterly negligent and irresponsible at this point in time to bring in another human being.
I've gone through the histories of some of these utopians, the ones who believe in the creation of a global utopian society.
Most people, when they give birth to children, it's a traditionalized, self-serving, established notion where we're going to have kids and have a family. To hell with the carrying capacity of the earth. To hell with the fact that we might be impoverished.
Like Bertrand Russell, Lord Bertrand Russell, the Huxleys, going back all the way to Sir Thomas Huxley, the pal of Charles Darwin. And they're all on board with exactly the same agendas to do with depopulation.
This is what all parents out there should be asking themselves. They shouldn't be having children for their own self-serving needs so they can have a family and be traditional and show up at church and have their 2 kids. It has to relate to something real. Humanity has to start thinking about its relationship to the earth. Until it does so, we're fucking doomed.
There are billions of people on this planet, many other groups that are much more productive and much more progressive than these supposed anti-New World Order people.
Problem, reaction, solution is devastating. It's been used for as long as you can chart back human history. And it goes like this. You want to change society or get people to accept something that in the normal course of events they wouldn't accept. So you don't say openly, this is what we're going to do and this is why we're going to do it. You play this technique. Stage 1, you create a problem. You want a reaction at stage 2 from the public of outrage, of classically fear. And you want them to either say to the authorities, do something, or you want them to accept what the authorities suggest must be done. So you can go to stage 3, which is to offer the solutions to the problems you have covertly created.
You say that in the society we're not going to have more laws, but you say we need to do some things to reduce world population because we are damaging the world with our kids. That's in the video Who is Peter Joseph that was uploaded very recently. And you say that laws are created because of needs, and if this great big cybernetic government on the Venus project says that there is too many people, don't a global law will be need to control the birds on this world?
Okay, well, I don't remember saying anything about the need for global depopulation. I didn't say anything like that.
The whole idea of bringing us through this crisis and into economic depression is to bring out a new system where money is not the key.
Well, to start with, I think this kind of the dictatorship of the future, I think will be very unlike the dictatorship which we've been familiar with in the immediate past.
People have asked me over the years, what's planned? And I've said, read 2 books, George Orwell's 1984 and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. The latter was published in 1932, Orwell's book was in 1948. Because these 2 had access to the agenda through something called the Fabian Society, they weren't writing from imagination. They had an understanding of where this was supposed to go.
All I've said in regards to population is the fact that we've expanded the population, as I think a lot of people have known, through energy and technology, and we're reaching a peak of our major established energy. And depopulation isn't going to be something that is going to be forced or something that's required. It's probably just going to happen naturally if we continue the processes that we have. As far as law and population, my disposition wasn't that was not that there was a requirement of law or anything like that. The real trick is to get people to establish a new educational, a new value system, if you will, that enables them to realize their relationship to the environment and what they actually do. I think, I believe that's what I stated in that interview that was done with me, was that people need to understand that they have to have foresight of their environment and realize that when they have children, it's not for their own self-serving needs, even though obviously there's an emotional, traditional aspect to that. They have to think about their relationship to the environment when they have kids.
If we try to visualize the future, it's the same, families and all that stuff. So when I make movies on the future, I have to use families in there. There'll be no families. Most people won't want children.
You have Aldous Huxley describing a society in which children are disconnected from their parents, where they're bred in laboratories, and where drugs are used to get the children to, and as they become adults, the whole population, to love their servitude and not rebel against it. And we are now seeing quite blatantly the movement to remove children from their parents.
They try to get women to believe in having children. You know, children are pain in the ass. They're not pleasant. They can't say anything new. They require a lot of your time. You can't travel. You can't do a lot of things. So the population in the future will be diminished.
If things get really, really bad, meaning when the collapse begins to occur more so, I might not be against governments imposing one-child policies, because things can get really, really bad where we have to start going down the barrel of really bad ideas before we can come back up and get on the correct path again.
What's being targeted is anything that holds people together. So the family unit is something that keeps people together. I'm not religious. I'm not into religion at all. But also religious structures are being targeted because they hold people together. Within that unit, there can be diversity of the way children and the family see the world. What any dictatorship wants, no matter what it is uniformity.
You're taught in school that everybody should have a right to their own opinion. Never give people the right to their own opinion. Their own opinion.
The way people see the world and see each other and all the rest of it. They want uniformity. You look at the Soviet Union. What was it? It was a centralized dictatorship that took away all diversity. You look at any fascist dictatorship, centralized control, take away diversity. So any unit of mutual support, or whatever you want to call it, that offers the opportunity for diversity of debate, diversity of view, they want rid of, because they want the central point in the tyranny to dictate the version of life and self that everybody has. You know, it's always the case that tyrannies want uniformity.
Do you believe that this brave new world that you talk about could, let's say in the next quarter century, the next century, could come here to our shores?
I think it could. I mean, that's why I feel it's so extremely important here and now to start thinking about these problems, not to let ourselves be taken by surprise by the new advances in technology.
Do you know a book that's called Ecoscience by John P. Holdren? John P. Holdren is actually the actual science advisor of Obama. He says that a world regime has to be imposed to control the world population. And I mean, do you believe that that book exists and John P. Holdren exists and all these people?
One of the frightening things I noticed when looking up Holdren's background is that he's a member of the Pugwash Conference, which was Bertrand Russell's organization. And you know, this whole thing about the world society deciding over sterilization and eugenics reminds me of this Bertrand Russell quote where it says, "A scientific world society will be necessary to find ways of preventing an increase in world population. It cannot be stable unless there's a world government."
Paul Ehrlich also believes that right now the world is overpopulated and that we need laws to make sure that the Earth is not going to die, because they believe that the Earth is some kind of God, and that when we bring children to Earth, then we are damaging the world.
No, the only thing that damages the world is the system that's been created that is not expansive for the nature of the growth of population. In other words, populations are growing because we have more access to food and energy. This growth pattern, I think, will be curtailed naturally as education flourishes, and a lot of the superstitions are eroded, and a lot of the basic value associations that are occurring are come to terms with, and people begin, as I stated, I think, in the documentary, people will begin to understand their relationship to the environment, and when they decide to bring in a child, they will understand what that actually means.
Here's what I'm saying to you. I've read the social workers 150 years ago. I've read the social engineers and the transhumanists and the posthumanists, and they all say very close to what you're saying about this utopia of the machines, because certainly you know about the socialists and the Fabian socialists and the engineers, and H.G. Wells and Bertrand Russell and all them, saying about 90% of what you're saying at the end of Zeitgeist Addendum, but overlaying it with government central control to be able to construct it.
As far as the annotations of what you denoted, there's lots of people out there with lots of bizarre ideas. The most distorted mentalities are the ones that want to preserve their establishments. So it doesn't surprise me, again, as I stated before, that those people in the highest echelon of the elite are going to try and create the idea that the current population is too large, so it has to be reduced, because they want to maintain their establishment. It's not that they want to change things into some order and reduce the population to some number. It has nothing to do with any of that.
1,200 official delegates from 113 nations were in Stockholm for the first international conference on the human environment.
We have got to learn to live with stabilized populations, with a more modest use of resources, and we cannot cheat by simply saying we're going to carry on with the same division as we have now. Because if 2/3 of humanity, as our delegates have been telling us again and again today, if 2/3 are to stay poor so that 1/3 can stay rich, my friends, they won't do it. It's as simple as that.
Modern man must re-establish an unbroken link with nature and with life. He must again learn to invoke the energy of growing things, and to recognize, as did the ancients in India centuries ago, that one can take from the earth and the atmosphere only so much as one puts back into them.
Eugenics has been with us for a very, very long time.
We've got to stabilize the population. When I was born,
so what's wrong with the population? I mean,
we're too many people. That's why we have global warming. We have global warming because too many people are using too much stuff. But if there were less people, they'd be using less stuff.
Many of us believe that the multiple crises in the world, energy, economic, climate, are signals of the encroaching limits to growth.
At first, it was open. Of course, you had eugenics courts in America, etc., that were dictating that certain children or families, certain, according to the authorities, IQs, etc., disablement, they were to be stopped from having children. And then, of course, Britain, as usual, was massively involved in it. And the Rockefeller families, the Harrimans, the Rothschilds, all these people were involved in it. Some very, very famous people through the years, including people involved in the Fabian Society, including Julian Huxley, who was the head of the British Eugenics Society. He was the brother of Aldous Huxley, who wrote Brave New World, very accurate book because he knew what the agenda was.
Here's what Julian Huxley said. Well, Huxley says the goal of this accidental development of evolution says man's true destiny is to guide the future course of evolution on Earth towards greater fulfillment. Whatever that means. He says the humanist goal must therefore be the fulfillment society. That's in an article that he published in 1962 called The Coming New Religion of Humanism. So don't say humanism is not a religion. The leaders of humanism recognize it as religion. He even wrote a book called Religion Without Revelation. Now, he was, as I said, the first Director General of UNESCO, United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. He wrote a white paper program should be, and among other things, this is what that paper said. This was called A New World Vision. This was the name of this article. It was kept secret for quite a long time. Later it was published by the Humanist magazine many years after, even after his death, I think. The general philosophy of UNESCO should, it seems, be a scientific world humanism, global in extent and evolutionary in background. So UNESCO has been pushing for that, and the whole United Nations has, for that matter, ever since.
Behind the facade of these families and these frontmen, they want to cull the population. Not only that, they want to manipulate the breeding of the population to remove what they perceive as the lower stock.
I'm going to have to go to somebody else, though.
Yes, but wait, last question, please. Last question, please. I mean, they are advocating for this.
No. It's somebody else's turn. No.
But please, all right, stop.
Can I?
One more question.
One more
Make
question.
it really short.
Yes. Okay. I mean, these people, this elite, is advocating for a transhumanist world with machines. In fact, I believe the technocratic era of Brzezinski, he advocates for this kind of world, the same world that you're saying. I mean, a transhumanist world, and it has nothing to do with the monetary system, and it has nothing to do with money at all.
Where in Zbigniew Brzezinski's writing does he talk about a transhumanist world? I've read all of his books.
The technotronic era. Do you know that book?
Okay. It's the issue of these points. I think are ultimately kind of pointless to talk about. It's
Why?
not even worth speculating on the perceptions of what these individuals assume, even if that was what Brzezinski stated. The transhumanist idea, these are utterly detached from anything that anyone in this room or this world at this stage needs to worry about.
Society or government step in when it comes to changing the genes of a child before birth? That's the question high school students in Harrisonburg are discussing today. It's called transhumanism, or altering the human body through biotechnology. Award-winning journalist and author Ronald Bailey analyzed the ethics of the question. 8 high schools participated in the 16th annual event. Professor Myron Blosser says students will be confronted with this issue because of the new technology.
If you go out to 2029, our computers are not going to be these rectangular devices we put in our pocket. They're going to be inside our bodies and brains, and we're going to be a hybrid of biological and non-biological intelligence.
Once you know where a gene is, then that opens up the possibility for manipulating that gene, cutting, pasting, changing, and so parents will eventually have the options of manipulating their DNA prior to having children.
In some ways, I'm trying to remember Brave New World enough. In some ways, you're entering a place to where could you be manipulated by this? Could somebody say, "Oh, I'm turning you off," click and turn you off?
Well, we already do a lot of intimate things with our computers. Technology has always been a double-edged sword.
Right.
Ever since we had fire and stone tools.
There will be, as he wished, a private funeral with no religious ceremony for Lord Bertrand Russell, one of the century's most talkative and talked about geniuses, who died yesterday, aged 97.
In another book put out by Russell, gradually by selective breeding, the congenital differences between rulers and ruled will increase until they become almost different species. A revolt of the plebs would become as unthinkable as an organized insurrection of sheep against the practice of eating mutton.
There's so many fantasies out there about this nefarious elite and all the shit.
Well, but Jack Fresco talks about the transhumanist idea when he says that machines have to merge with humans. I mean, that's the idea of the transhumanist agenda.
And that concept in and of itself has no negative or positive attributes. There's nothing positive or negative to it, and it has no relationship to anything any politician has to say.
Are you saying that Jack Fresco saying that is crazy, and that crazy idea of transhumanism is crazy?
Yeah, we need to move on.
No, not at all. What I'm saying is that, first of all, Jack Fresco doesn't talk about, quote, transhumanism. He talks about the reality that technology will flourish to an extent where humans might be modifying themselves to keep up with the pace. Same thing that Ray Kurzweil talks about.
There have been many attempts throughout the world, particularly in the old Soviet Union, to take the brain out of an animal, they like the dog, for example, and keep it alive with machinery. Now, you can do that with the heart, the kidney, the liver, the lung, all the other body organs, solid organs. But nobody had ever been able to do it with the brain. And part of the reason is we must remember the brain is very delicate when it comes to its blood supply. And so when we finally did it and found that this brain of a highly developed animal had brain waves, had biochemistry, was functioning just as it would. Now, we couldn't talk to it, we could send it electrical signals, we could show that it could actually hear and so forth, but we didn't know whether it was processing the information. If you can do it for the animal brain, you could do it for the human brain.
You've even written about the use of drugs in this light.
Well, now, this is a very interesting subject. I mean, in this book that you mentioned, this book of mine, Brave New World, I postulated a substance called Soma, which was a very versatile drug. It would make people feel happy in small doses. It would make them see visions in medium doses, and it would send them to sleep in large doses.
So consciousness can be transplanted. Obviously, personality, if you want to speak of the monkey having personality, can be transferred. And so you might ask, where did this bring us as far as the human spirit or soul goes? And I guess you could argue it can be transplanted.
Jacques, you've talked about emotion a lot in our conversations, and I think it's a tremendous point, because people have, again, a strong romantic need to think that emotion has a really powerful aspect in life as far as functionality, when I think you have mentioned to me that you feel emotion gets in the way more than anything else. Fortunately, people have been so conditioned now to think that a high-efficient society is somehow cold and unemotional, which they don't. And it is, in fact, somewhat, because we're eliminating all the problems of those emotional tendencies.
There was a data transmission for you from the controller's office.
Oh, about my trip, no doubt. To the Savage Reservation, you know.
Yes. I think they're canceling it on you.
Canceled? They couldn't. They wouldn't. Not when I've made plans to... Where is it?
In the file.
There must be some mistake. I had everything planned. How would something like that look on my computer file?
You'd better take a Soma.
Yes, that's just the thing.
Here you are, sir. I guess you won't be going on your vacation now.
Oh, we'll see about that.
These are technological, evolutionary things, just like somebody with Parkinson's disease has a chip in his head that can have software uploaded to it. He's not a fucking transhumanist. He's just a goddamn patient that has a fucking thing in his head that he needs it for. This will be the same thing that happens.
We have a Florida family who are really pioneers in a brave new world. They have volunteered to be the first ever to have microchip identification devices implanted into their body.
RFID is a technology that uses tiny computer chips the size of a grain of sand or even smaller, hooked up to miniature antennas to transmit information about items at a distance. The latest technology for identifying people at the point of sale, for identifying people when they make purchases, is actually the implantable chip that you can actually embed directly into human flesh. It's a tiny glass capsule about the size of a grain of rice. It contains an RFID computer chip with a coiled antenna, and it can transmit information also at a distance.
And what are the future applications of this? I mean, I presume it'll be able to do more things than just open your open your car door or your front door or log onto your computer.
Yeah, there's the common theme is access control, but some people are matching profiles to it. So you get in your front door, but then like a home automation system knows that it's you and sets lighting and music and that kind of preference.
In West Palm Beach, Florida, 100 elderly men and women diagnosed with Alzheimer's are now walking around with microchips embedded under their skin, and more are on the waiting list. Alzheimer's Community Care offers this service for free.
You've got a vulnerable person that is not always able to define what's wrong with them. And when you go into an emergency room, efficiency and effectiveness is the most important way of getting good treatment.
A New Jersey policeman says he's alive today thanks to a medical ID chip implanted in his arm.
Sometime in the next century, because computer chips are getting smaller and faster, and eventually the time will come when a child is implanted with a little chip back here and will learn to control the chip in the same way that you learn to control your bodily functions and your voice and your movements, so that not only can you, right now my mind is telling my body to talk, and it's supplying my mouth with the words that I'm giving to you, and the mind could also learn to say to the chip, go to a certain web page, download some information, and supply it to the inside of my eyeball.
You believe that you're going to be actually able to tell your mind through a chip to provide you with information that you can then speak. So on this program, this would be great for me. You put a little chip in there, and if I didn't know something, I could say would I have to say it out loud or just think it?
Either way.
I could just think it, give me an answer.
Our chip is a tiny miniaturized RFID, or radio frequency identification microchip. It's 11 millimeters by 1 millimeter. It's about the size of a grain of rice.
Well, we've got one sitting there by a penny to give us a little perspective of the size. Very
Correct.
Tiny. You implant it under the skin how?
It gets injected, just like getting a shot of penicillin or any medicine that you would get in a doctor's office. It goes in the upper right arm, which is the area that our physicians have chosen for ease of access as well as biocompatibility.
All right. Show me how this works. You've got a scanner here, and you have a chip implanted. Is it underneath your right arm?
It's in the right arm. You power up a scanner, and you simply scan the arm. And once you scan the arm, you'll see that the identification information.
And on the laptop here you have it hooked up to, it says some number, but that doesn't tell me anything about your health condition. Now, from that number, they access your health records.
Right, that's correct. If you go into further detail on the database about Scott Silverman, it'll have my driver's license information, it'll have medical information, it'll have financial information, and it'll have security information for ingress and egress into facilities.
We build sailboats for your use. You don't have to come to the Fresco and say, can I use a sailboat this Sunday? I say, there's 50 people before you. We build more than required, so you can take it out yourself. The only difference is your sailboat is monitored by satellite. In case there's fire at sea, we know where to go to get you. Not Big Brother watching you. I'm talking about safety for your own good.
All right, you hear the sound of the background, people saying, Big Brother, too much information, a little scary. How do you respond to that?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I used to get that question a lot 2 years ago. Today, we've gotten it a lot less. In fact, the Attorney General of Mexico and some of his staff have received this chip for security purposes. And when the acceptance rate of the product goes up significantly like it has, some of the privacy concerns go down.
Okay, so the computer
tools, glasses are tools.
Sure, but all of these are external. The computer should be in you, and that's what frightens me. Scientists tell us that it is absolutely true and absolutely possible for a human being to have a chip embedded in their system and to have many, many things appear in their mind upon command.
So I'm going to stop the conversation as far as this.
Okay.
These are not relevant points.
How, but it is relevant to debate something. I mean, how it's not relevant to discuss something?
We educate children to be able to relate to one another, to speak, communicate with a referential language. That means today, I believe most of you have been brought up to believe that everyone should have a right to their own opinion. Isn't that true? Most of you? Okay. Let's say you live across the street from me, and I see 10 guys coming out of your apartment. I can have all kinds of opinions, right? You can be a language instructor, a ballet instructor, but if you give everybody the right to their own opinion, you're generating a lot of new problems.
The word Fabianism comes from the Fabian Society, which was formed in England in 1884. The Fabian Society, it was named after a Roman general by the name of Quintus Fabius. And he was famous in history for defeating his enemy not by beating him on the battlefield, but by wearing him down in delaying tactics. In other words, he would wear his enemy down by refusing to make a frontal engagement. The Fabians selected him as their symbol or the symbolic name on purpose. They objected to the Leninists, not on the basis of their goals of collectivism, because they agreed with that. They were saying to the Leninists, you people are stupid, you're going about it in the wrong way. You're trying to conquer the world and make a new world order based on the model of collectivism through force and violence and bloodshed and quick revolution. That's the wrong way, they said. The proper way is patient gradualism. They said, let's follow the motto or the tactics of Quintus Fabius and delay so there's no confrontation, and drag it out over a long period of time, and instead of confronting your enemy head on, we will infiltrate his institutions. We will move our people into his government agencies, into his educational institutions, and into his charitable organizations, into his corporations, and we'll gradually convert the world. Now, who are the Fabians? Well, when they were formed, of course, there were such well-known people as Arnold Toynbee, the famous historian, George Bernard Shaw, H.G. Wells.
Wells' last book of prophecy was The Shape of Things to Come. His final vision was dark but hopeful, full of untold violence, but also the possibility of enlightenment and change. Writing in 1933, Wells predicted an apocalyptic world war.
All of the cities and all the infrastructures and everything are destroyed, and so what you're going to get are little pockets of surviving humanity. Feudal societies, basically, enslaving their peoples.
But out of this, Wells prophesied a new consciousness would emerge, spearheaded by a visionary elite that would take control of the weapons of war and create a world state.
These airmen come and they stop this fighting. I mean, they're able to pacify the people and to lead them, literally, to a new world where they build a new state of technological wonders.
By the middle of the 21st century, Wells envisioned a peaceful world, liberated from old hatreds and adorned with scientific marvels.
This man's not sleeping. He's dead.
Dead in his world, dead with him, and a new world beginning.
Plato described the whole technique. Today we call it a form of indoctrination, predictive programming. Which means that through fiction, or through when you're enjoying yourself, through being entertained, that when you're under the cover, your sensor part of your mind is not working. And when it's not working, you're unaware that you're being downloaded like a computer. And so all the little emotional techniques that you use, and you're identifying with the hero or the female with the heroine, and there's people in between these days, and all that kind of stuff. Once you start identifying with the characters, they've got you, because they can take you anywhere, no matter what that character does, because as long as you identify this much with them, they can take you that much.
For now, we have to put the world in order. It will be a long and complicated struggle, but we have the unity of a common order and a common knowledge. This is how I conceive our plan of operations. First, the roundup of brigands, that last dismal vestige of ancient predatory soldiery. the last would-be conquerors. Then settle, organize, advance, this zone, then that, and at last, wings over the world, and the new world begins.
Anyway, I'm getting tired though, guys. If anyone has any singular questions or anything else they want to say, I
mean, I'm discussing something, how that can be irrelevant towards the transition to...
I've been working with the Technocrats Incorporated here in America, and I see in his latest lecture, Jacques Fresco mentions them briefly and says that their scope is too limited. I would agree with that. I gotta say though, in general, if the Zeitgeist movement really starts to pick up, I guarantee you the Technocrats will be behind you. I mean, they're not continentalists, but that's not what their minds really are. That's just old plans from the 1920s where they really didn't have that much form of communication with other countries or whatever.
Centuries ago, in primitive times, before the dawn of civilization, there were things that would be inconceivable to us today. Such things as poverty.
The movie industry is there to indoctrinate you into possibilities which you swallow as possibilities, and then they actually come out in reality. This technique has been used very effectively since the BBC, in fact, first started up as a radio station for World War I.
Although there was actually land and food in abundance, some starved, because unlike our perfect society, they were unable or unwilling to balance population to consumption.
We do a survey of what the carrying capacity of the Earth is, and that tells us how many people the Earth can support. If you exceed that, you're going to have malnutrition, disease, and territorial disputes. Do you understand that? So many acres can support so many people. If you put more than what the ground can support, you're going to have disease, malnutrition, and problems.
So how do you make sure that you don't exceed the limits of the resources?
Well, the survey committee tells us how many hospitals we need.
Educate people.
They have to be educated.
But is it going to be done by birth control or euthanasia?
You have to educate people.
Right, well, educating people doesn't stop people from producing people. There's lots of jobs to that babies.
We show them a film called Dynamic Equilibrium in Nature. If you produce more people than land can support, these are the problems you're going to have. Now, if they don't seem to understand that, that's another problem.
You have learned, Winston, now you must understand. You have read the book, Goldstein's book, parts of it at least. The program it sets forth is nonsense. The secret spread of knowledge, a proletarian rebellion, the overthrow of the party. It could not happen in 1,000 years or 1,000,000. I know. I wrote the book.
After Orwell published 1984, in June 1949, he sent a copy to Huxley. And Huxley wrote him a long letter saying how much he admired the book, and they entered into a literary dialogue about which vision was more compelling and more relevant. Huxley maintained that it was far more likely that the future would consist of totalitarian dictators who would realize that the most effective way to continue to rule would be to inculcate a method whereby we would love our servitude.
In the past, we can say that all revolutions have essentially aimed at changing the environment in order to change the individual. I mean, there's been the political revolution, the economic revolution, in the time of the Reformation, the religious revolution. All these aimed, as I say, not directly at the human being, but at his surroundings, so that by modifying the surroundings you did achieve, at one remove, an effect upon the human being. Today, we are faced, I think, with the approach of what may be called the ultimate revolution, the final revolution, where a man can act directly on the mind-body of his fellows.
Joy comes from that bliss of connectedness. That's our God spirit. That's that side of ourselves that really feels it. And you can feel it deep inside you. It's this amazing, wonderful feeling. And you know it when you get it. You don't get it from money. You get it from connection.
Have you ever cried to a movie? I am still on the verge of me falling in tears. It angers me. It saddens me. I've never been in this emotional stress ever. Because this video will change your life. It's called Zeitgeist Addendum.
Get out there. Get the troops ready. Yeah, we can educate, but first let's dance. Get people in the mood.
I would like to see all the members of the movement wearing, you know, the Zeitgeist movement shirts and, you know, putting the Zeitgeist movement bumper stickers on their cars.
When I came back to the United States, I decided that if you could use propaganda for war, you could certainly use it for peace.
I'm inclined to think that the scientific dictatorships of the future, and I think there are going to be scientific dictatorships in many parts of the world, will be probably a good deal nearer to the Brave New World pattern than to the 1984 pattern. They will be a good deal nearer, not because of any humanitarian qualms in the scientific dictators, but simply because the Brave New World pattern is probably a good deal more efficient than the other. As dictators become more and more scientific, more and more concerned with a technically perfectly running society, they will be more and more interested in the kind of techniques which I imagined and described from existing realities in Brave New World.
While we have been perfectly conditioned to want only what we have, and to have only what we want, and are therefore always happy, the uncivilized ancients were prey to destructive emotions, and even collecting into groups called families, a pervasively immoral concept of pre-civilized times.
We're behind you. The technocrats will be behind you if it catches on worldwide.
There is no opposition to the technocrats, as Jacques will state. The only problem that Jacques sees with the history of the technocrats are some racial things that occurred when he was in their establishment. The technocrats really didn't come up with much of a blueprint, from what I understand, and I would love to see the technocrats. It doesn't matter what we call any of this stuff, you know. Technocracy does have a history that can be loaded with certain concepts, and that's an unfortunate reality with any organization that has a history, of course. But nevertheless, I'm happy to hope that technocrats will come forward and we can get rid of these names and lines and try to find a collective focus to move forward.
User disconnected from your channel.
By all means. So I'm glad to hear that.
Por ejemplo, estamos hablando de la disminución de la población y eso lo propuso Malthus en el año 1800. Y todas las nuevas, todos los neofilósofos, los filósofos que van marcando paradigmas en su etapa, lo han planteado. El problema es que cada vez que se plantea la desaparición de los políticos, los que llegan son los milicos. Ese es el problema. Entonces, ¿qué modalidad o viable? Porque los políticos son primos y hermanos de los medios de comunicación. Ahí tenéis una familia poderosísima e insanciable.
A permanent site for the United Nations World Capitol is also approved. From 42nd Street between First Avenue and the East River in New York, the future skyscraper headquarters will occupy 6 blocks, running north to 48th Street. This $8.5 million tract is the gift of John D. Rockefeller Jr. and solves a difficult problem for the UN.
One of the major aspects of collectivism is that it's based on the principle that the individual must be sacrificed if necessary for the greater good of the greater number. You'll find that under all fascism, socialism, or neoconism, or whatever you want to do. All of these forms of collectivism have that fundamental philosophy or ideology beneath it. Now, that sounds pretty good to many people. It sounded good to me when I was in school and learning about the greater good of the greater number. After all, we've been taught that we live in a democracy and therefore the majority should rule and all of these things which sound very good if you don't probe too deeply. And so many people think that that's a good concept. But it's a terrible concept when you follow it to its roots. Because you see, there's no such thing as a group. A group doesn't really exist. It's all in the mind. The word group is an abstraction.
Essentially, what the Venus Project proposes is that we bring all the nations together and take care of everything on Earth. We pledge allegiance to the environment and all the world's people. The end of separate nations. The end of the artificial boundaries that separate people.
It's similar to the concept of the word forest. You can look at a forest, you say, well, I'm looking at a forest, but you're not. You're looking at trees. They're only trees, and so the word forest is this abstraction for the concept of many trees. And the same thing is true in social structures. The word group is a very deceptive word. We think that the group somehow has rights. Well, since there is no such thing as a group, we're really dealing with the concept of many individuals having somehow more rights than a smaller group of individuals. And so that really, if you follow it all the way to its core, is a question of mathematics. Collectivism is based on the substance that three people really have the right to tell two people what to do regardless, because there's 3 against 2. And once you boil it down to the issue of mathematics, it falls apart, because human rights are not based on mathematics.
Formally presented its gift to the UN in March of 1947.
The future of this country and the lives of our children and our children's children are interwoven with the success of the United Nations. In it lies the hope of the people of the world. My father considers it a privilege to have had a part in the development of its permanent home. I'm glad to hand you, Mr. Lee, my father's check.
Thank you, Mr. Rockefeller.
In moving towards their ultimate objective of having world government, they have created various crises along the way over the last 100 years. World War I, as we've talked about, was contrived. World War II was contrived. We got the United Nations as a result of World War II, which was one of their big goals. Even though they denied the fact that they ever intended to have the United Nations as a world government, some of their more esoteric documents show very clearly that that's what they intended right from the start. And we're starting to see that now with the Commission on Global Governance. All the international treaties that we're looking at, especially the environmental treaties.
There's a need for a new world order, but it has different characteristics in different parts of the world. Now, none of this may succeed this time. But this, to me, is sort of the outline by which someday, in the next few years, a solution will emerge. In some countries or in some regions, people lose their jobs. Major adjustments have to be made. That's the engine of globalization. The people who are disadvantaged by the process look to their governments for solutions. But the governments are national and the problem is global. So how to bring about a relationship between the desirable process of globalization and its impact on the politics?
If all you can do, people out there that buy this New World Order stuff, if all you can do is sit back and worry about, eugenics and worry about world government in some abstraction, you know, then you're missing some huge things. You're missing some massive, massive things that need to be addressed. Ignore the religious fantasy about the New World Order. It's pointless. It doesn't do anything.
I think you very eloquently described the enormous flaws in the financial system in America, in the world, the way we think, materialism and so on. You applied a very exact and a very elegant science to it. In the last part of your film with the Venus Project, it's a science, but I'm not sure it's that exact a science. I don't think that the answers that we're looking for can necessarily be described on a stage by you right now or by anybody else. They may be things outside of our current way of thinking.
Well, obviously. In 2008, Peter Joseph was part of an event organized by the Luminopolis Festival in London, and we can read from their own webpage the following. Luminopolis aims to support non-governmental organizations in the development of creative ways to present their messages, connecting them to artists from the wider community. Luminopolis can provide support both on the organization as well as financially for creative proposals that serve such a purpose. Now if you go to the website and check out who is financially supporting this festival, you will see a lot of environmental front organizations such as Greenpeace, but more importantly, the World Wildlife Fund, the main arm of UNESCO and the whole United Nations equation.
I'd like to take the debate into another quick. I mean, we've been debating the science here. We've not debated anything in terms of the credibility of the environmentalist movement. The environmentalist movement was formed by Sir Julian Huxley, who was the founder of the Eugenics Society. The WWF and these other organizations are actually offspins from that Eugenics Society.
Peter Joseph was also awarded for his two films, Zeitgeist and Zeitgeist Addendum, on the Artemis Film Festival, which also receives financial backup by the United Nations, quote-unquote friends, in the way of Petrobras, a Brazilian oil company. From their own webpage, quote, Petrobras is the only energy company that's part of the Global Compact Board of the United Nations. But that's not everything. Artemis also admits, quote, in recognition of the socially conscious platform it provides, Artemis has been endorsed by the United Nations Department of Public Information, unquote. This sounds interesting if we realize that this is the platform that Peter Joseph has used to premiere both Zeitgeist films.
Okay, we don't ask for money. I'm not here asking for donations.
When a big newspaper gives you a push for putting out a video, you know you've got backing in a higher realm than other people who are making little videos. They've seen the future and dislike the present. 2 hours into Z-Day, the educational forum associated with the online movie Zeitgeist, Peter Joseph, the film's director and the evening's MC, stepped out from behind his lectern and walked forward earnestly on the stage. This is from the New York Times, March 16th, 2009.
The whole history of recent times in relation to science and technology shows that if you plant the seed of applied science or technology, it proceeds to grow, and it grows according to the laws of its own being. And the laws of its being are not necessarily the same as the laws of our being. Nothing is easier, of course, than to enunciate ideals and to say, oh, well, wouldn't it be nice if everybody were good and kind and loving, etc., etc. Of course it would be very nice, but the point is, how do you implement these ideals? How do you fulfill your good social and psychological intentions? And when you come down to this problem, you see it's a very complex problem of organizing family life, organizing education, organizing sexual life.
You would see a slow gravitation toward the new system. Do I think it will actually happen like that? No. Though I am going to try and propose ideas that could allow that to happen. We all know that it's going to take something fairly cataclysmic to wake the society up, to shake up the beehive, if you will.
Organizing social and economic life. I mean, there are endless factors involved in this. And to try to work out what all these factors should be is, I must say, I found a very interesting job.
back in 1965, the Department of Health and Education and Welfare, HEW, sponsored a study to define how they're going to get from where they were then in 1965 to where we are now in the 21st century. They came out with a report in 1969 called the Behavioral Science Teacher Education Program that's now fully integrated within our educational program. And this is what they said, and I want to have you hang on to your hats because you will not believe what they planned to do back in 1965-69 and what is happening actually today. He said calculations of the future and how to modify it are no longer considered to be an obscure academic pursuit. Long-range planning and implementation of plans will be made by a technological scientific elite. This will strain the democratic fabric to the ripping point. The Protestant ethic will atrophy as more and more enjoyed a varied, leisured, and guaranteed sustenance. Work as a means to, and an end of living will diminish. Most people will tend to be hedonistic, and a dominant elite will provide the bread and circuses to keep social dissension and disruption at a minimum. A small elite will carry society's burdens. The resulting impersonal manipulation of most people's lifestyles will be softened by provision for pleasure-seeking and guaranteed physical necessities. The society will be a leisurely one. People will study, play, and travel. Some will be in various stages of the drug-induced experiences. Each individual will receive at birth a multi-purpose identification which will have, amongst other things, extensive communications and control uses. Each individual will be saturated with ideas of information. Each will be self-selected. Other kinds will be imposed overtly by those who assume the responsibility for the other's actions. Relatively few individuals will be able to maintain control over their opinions. Most will be pawns of competing opinion molders. The controlling elite will engage in power plays largely without the involvement of most of the people. And that is so true today. Most people have no idea what's going on in the international arena. Have none. Almost all of this is being done in secrecy.
We're gullible, but we're also willingly gullible. We want a human being, a big daddy, to come along and make everything right for us. And as long as we believe that, we'll always basically get shafted.
They have all the money they want. They can make all the money they want. They have a machine that can make all the money. It's not about money. It's about control. It's about their vision of how they want to see the world in their eyes. And, you know, you and I believe in individuality, in the person being the dominant thing, the individual being the dominant person. Today we live in a world where institutions are dominant, not people.
The only greater good for the greater number really comes from the concept of individualism. When you deny the majority to take away the rights or the property of the minority. If you hold up the individual as the supreme element in society instead of the group, under that philosophy, under that ideology, now you do actually have the greatest good for the greatest number. We don't want to control people's lives, so we backed out of politics. Politics, no, I hate politicians. It's all dirty work and so forth. And we just backed away and let the collectivists who love that kind of work take over. And suddenly dawned on me, that's why we're losing. We didn't have the power.
Is it any better world than it used to be? I rebel against this progress. What has this progress, this world civilization done to us? Machines and marvels. They've built these great cities of theirs, yes. They've prolonged life, yes. They've conquered nature, they say, and made a great white world. Is it any jollier than the world used to be in the good old days, when life was short and hot and merry and the devil took the hindmost?
History is so full of examples of people who have been downtrodden, and then when they can't take it anymore, they've risen up, and at great cost in blood and treasure, they may have been able to overthrow some tyrannical regime, and then they wake up and find out that a year or two later, they've replaced it with one just as bad. So we want a protectorate. We don't want this state to govern us. What we want it to do is to protect us, to protect our lives, liberty, and property. Nothing more. Now we call that a protectorate, and we get rid of this word called government, and it causes us to think of the true purpose of this thing we call the state.
And so that's an important part also. We have a creed, we know what we believe in, and we put those two things together. We've got a positive view of a better way, and we have a mechanism for infiltrating, and that's the word the enemy uses, infiltrating. I don't like it. But going into organizations that we should have been into, organizations that we should have been into all along. We should have been in politics. We should have been on the school boards. We should have been in the city councils. We should have been in all these places. Go back into those areas and take them back.
I don't want to go into details on these rather nonsensical, idealized concepts that, you know, there's an overarching elite and they're just going to use machines for everything, get rid of the population, then they'll be happy in their, quote, New World Order, as is discussed by all these idiots out there that just bore me to death.